The room does not erupt when Princess Charlotte speaks. It becomes terrifyingly quiet. What begins as an ordinary private family gathering at Windsor Castle suddenly turns into something nobody inside the ancient walls is prepared to manage. The young princess refuses to acknowledge Camilla as her grandmother. Charles hears every word. William understands immediately what it means. Catherine watches her daughter's face and realizes this is not childish defiance. Charlotte has made a deliberate choice, and Camilla knows it. Charles had expected the Windsor luncheon to pass without incident. William and Catherine had arrived with Charlotte, George, and Louis, knowing recent family tensions made even a private meal sensitive. Camilla had kept the conversation deliberately light, steering talk toward gardens and harmless recollections. Windsor Castle mattered because private gatherings there carried none of the formal protection of a public ceremony. This was family territory where rank could not easily hide emotion. For several minutes, everyone played their part. Then the Queen Consort casually described herself as belonging to the children's grandparent generation, meaning the older family members occupying a grandparent-like place around them. Charlotte looked up and answered with devastating calm. She already knew who her grandmothers were. She said she would not call Camilla grandmother. Camilla tried to smile, but her hand stopped above the teacup. She had survived hostility from adults, public scrutiny, and years of comparison. Yet this rejection landed differently because it came from a granddaughter of the king and a child who would remain close to the monarchy's future. William felt anger rise, but not toward Charlotte. He watched his daughter carefully instead of correcting her. Catherine moved one hand beside the girls on the table, a small act that told everyone she understood there was something beneath the words. George went silent. Louis looked between the adults. Nobody attempted to rescue the conversation. Charles finally asked why Charlotte had said it. His voice stayed low, but the question carried the authority of both grandfather and monarch. The king expected perhaps an embarrassed apology. Instead, Charlotte answered that some family names had to be earned by how people made you feel. Camilla immediately looked toward William. The accusation needed no words. Had the prince encouraged this? He answered before she could ask. He had never instructed his daughter to reject her, and Catherine quietly confirmed it. Charlotte then asked whether she could leave. Catherine nodded. The young princess pushed her chair back, and the scrape against the floor seemed louder than anything spoken that afternoon. Camilla remained frozen while Charles stared toward William, suddenly aware that no palace command could explain what had just happened. Catherine followed her daughter into the corridor, where Charlotte finally admitted this was not the first time Camilla had made her uncomfortable. Weeks earlier, one private encounter had changed everything. The palace could survive one uncomfortable sentence, but what Charlotte told Catherine behind that closed door transformed the remark from a family embarrassment into the consequence of something that had been building for months. For Charlotte, the argument is not really about a title. For Camilla, that is exactly why it hurts. Catherine finds herself caught between protecting a daughter who feels deeply and preserving peace around a king already burdened by family fractures. William faces an even harder calculation. He can order royal protocol. He can control household arrangements. But forcing his child to manufacture affection for someone she does not emotionally accept may cost far more than silence. Catherine sits beside Charlotte after the luncheon and does not begin with discipline. She asks what grandmother means to her, and the answer comes slowly. Trust, safety, stories, and someone who makes you feel protected rather than pressured. Charlotte has grown up around royal titles where words such as queen and heir shape public duty and private identity. An heir is the person expected to inherit the throne, but to a child, family language carries weight. Catherine understands that distinction and refuses to turn her daughter's feelings into a performance. Camilla feels the wound from another room. She tells Charles that she can tolerate hostile headlines and comparison, but she cannot pretend rejection from his granddaughter means nothing. The king tries to reassure her, yet he pauses before saying, "Charlotte will come around." That hesitation cuts deeper than intended. Camilla has spent years seeking acceptance inside his family, and the younger generation represents something ceremonies cannot guarantee: private belonging. Charles reaches for her hand, but she asks whether belonging can be real if it must be requested. William finds Catherine later and asks the question both have avoided. Did Charlotte mention Diana? Catherine confirms their daughter has become curious about the grandmother she never knew, especially after seeing photographs and hearing memories from her father. Then she adds something more troubling. Charlotte is not rejecting Camilla because Diana has become idealized. During a private conversation after the luncheon, the girl described an exchange weeks earlier in which she felt Camilla dismissed something emotionally important to her. William stops outside Charlotte's bedroom before entering. His hand reaches the door handle, then falls away. The future king understands royal harmony is no longer the issue. His daughter has been pulled into an adult history she never created, and he must decide whether to speak as a prince protecting order or as a father protecting trust. When he enters, Charlotte tells him everything changed during a palace ceremony, when Camilla corrected her over Diana in front of someone she trusted. To understand why one word became impossible for Charlotte to say, the family had to return to that afternoon when a correction became, in the young princess's mind, an unforgivable line crossed. Weeks before the Windsor luncheon, there had been no argument, no dramatic walkout, and no family order. There was only a quiet room, a photograph of Diana, and one sentence Charlotte carried away with her. Adults forgot the exchange almost immediately. Charlotte did not. What Camilla considered a harmless correction settled differently in the young princess's mind, because it touched the one relationship she could know only through stories, and suddenly made those stories feel as though they needed defending. Charlotte had spent several afternoons with William asking about old family photographs and the people behind them. Catherine encouraged those conversations because she wanted Charlotte, George, and Louis to understand their history as a family before they understood it as monarchy. A private family heritage presentation at Windsor was simply an informal gathering where photographs and personal objects from earlier generations were discussed away from public ceremony. William kept Diana's memory simple and personal. He described her as their grandmother, spoke about her warmth, and never used the past as a weapon against anyone living. Charlotte paused beside one photograph and quietly called her grandmother Diana. Camilla entered during the exchange and heard the words. She hesitated, then told the young princess she should not become too attached to people she never knew when she had family around her now. The sentence was calm. Its effect was not. Charlotte looked down, closed the small album she had been studying, and asked William whether they could continue another day. He immediately knew something had shifted. Later, the prince told Camilla that his daughter was old enough to understand tone, but far too young to carry the weight of decades of family pain. The queen consort insisted she had only wanted Charlotte grounded in the present. Catherine eventually learned there had been another moment nobody knew about. Charlotte had left the room, then returned quietly because she had forgotten a bracelet. Before entering fully, she heard Camilla telling an aide that constant references to Diana could become confusing for the children. The aide said little, but Charlotte heard enough. To her, the meaning felt brutally clear. Remembering her grandmother was becoming a problem other people wanted managed. Charlotte kept that hurt to herself for weeks. She never confronted Camilla, never demanded an explanation, and never told William what she had overheard. Instead, she reached a private conclusion. If accepting one grandmother meant weakening the place of another, she would refuse the newer name completely. William listened as his daughter finally recounted the forgotten bracelet moment. He lowered his eyes and placed the family photograph in his hand, face down on the desk. The Windsor luncheon had not been impulsive disobedience. It had been the end of a decision Charlotte had been carrying in silence. By evening, the issue was no longer whether Charlotte had behaved badly. William wanted to know why a child had been placed in a position where defending a dead grandmother felt necessary, and Camilla was about to hear that question directly. William does not summon advisors. He does not request a formal family meeting. He asks Camilla to speak privately, waits until the door closes, and tells her there will be no discussion of Charlotte's manners until they discuss what happened first. Camilla arrives expecting pressure to repair the luncheon. Instead, she finds a father who believes his daughter has been carrying an emotional burden created by adults, and he refuses to let royal hierarchy bury it. William keeps Charles out of the room deliberately. The monarch's presence would turn the exchange into a question of rank and royal precedence. The formal order deciding who stands above whom within the institution is exactly what the prince wants to avoid. This is not about who outranks Charlotte. It is about who has the right to define her private feelings. Camilla expects him to demand an apology for the humiliation at Windsor. Instead, he recounts the photograph, the forgotten bracelet, and the second remark his daughter overheard. William places both palms on the back of a chair, but does not sit. Camilla remains seated as he asks the question she has been dreading. Did you tell her that remembering her grandmother was confusing? The queen answers carefully that the comment was never intended for Charlotte to hear. His expression hardened. Intention, he says, does not erase impact. His voice remains controlled until he explains what the words created. Charlotte now believes accepting Camilla emotionally would mean betraying Diana. Camilla's restraint finally cracks. She tells William that she has spent years being judged against a woman who died long before the current family structure took shape. Every memory of Diana, she admits, can make her feel as though there is no emotional space left left for anyone else. She says she reacted badly because she feared Charlotte's growing attachment to those stories would eventually turn into another comparison she could never win. The prince listens, but he does not retreat. His daughter, he says, was never asking Camilla to compete. William then draws the line. Nobody has forbidden Charlotte from caring for her, and nobody will encourage hostility. But no one will command the girl to use a family word she does not mean. Camilla asks whether that is merely his opinion or a new household rule. His answer lands with brutal simplicity. For my children, Catherine and I decide. Camilla falls silent. The anger gives way to humiliation because she understands what that boundary means. Charles may be king, but forcing his granddaughter to manufacture affection would make royal authority look cruel rather than strong. Within the hour, he hears exactly what William has said and asks to meet his son alone. Camilla had expected the king's authority to restore order, but Charles now faced a choice no crown could make easy: protect his wife's dignity or recognize his son's right to protect his daughter. Charles has spent a lifetime inside a system built on titles, precedents, and obligation. Yet the crisis before him cannot be resolved by any of them. He can tell Charlotte where to stand. He can determine which ceremonies she attends. He can establish how members of the household formally address the queen. What he cannot do without consequence is order his granddaughter to feel a bond she does not feel, and William knows that before entering the room. Charles meets William alone without aides or private secretaries because he wants no record of hesitation surrounding what has become an intensely personal decision. The king begins by calling the dispute a threat to family unity, not a challenge to Camilla's rank. Royal protocol, the formal rules governing behavior, titles, and ceremony, can control public conduct, but William makes clear that Charlotte will follow those rules whenever required. She will be respectful. She will behave correctly. The word grandmother, however, belongs to private affection, not constitutional duty. Charles admits the refusal has wounded Camilla more deeply than she has said publicly or privately. William does not dismiss that pain, but his answer is immediate. Charlotte was wounded first. His daughter was too young to understand decades of royal tension and had no power when an adult made her feel that remembering Diana was somehow disloyal. The prince insists that correcting Charlotte now would teach the wrong lesson, that the strongest person in the room gets to define everyone else's emotions. Charles feels the conflict tightening around him. He loves his wife and knows how long she has fought to feel secure inside the family. Yet he also knows his granddaughter will remember what happens next. The monarch asks whether Catherine truly supports William's position. He answers yes. Together they have decided that Charlotte will use Camilla's proper royal form of address when protocol requires it, but privately she will never be ordered to call her grandmother. George and Louis will be given the same freedom to let those relationships develop naturally. Charles removes his glasses and sets them beside a closed folder. Silence stretches between father and son. He finally says he will not compel Charlotte. The decision is quiet, but its meaning is enormous. Royal structure remains under his authority, yet William and Catherine retain control over their children's emotional upbringing. Even a sovereign cannot command trust without risking the very family bond he is trying to protect. Charles believes the matter can still remain behind Windsor's closed doors. That belief does not survive long. When Camilla learns he will not overrule William, something in her behavior changes, and staff begin noticing her absence from gatherings she would normally never miss. The king had chosen not to force Charlotte's affection, but the decision did not create peace. It created distance, and Camilla's reaction would make that distance visible almost immediately. The first consequence is not a statement. It is an empty chair. Camilla quietly withdraws from a private family tea where Charlotte is expected to attend, telling Charles she sees no purpose in creating another uncomfortable encounter. What looks like restraint feels far more serious inside the family. Catherine worries Charlotte will blame herself. William suspects the withdrawal is a form of pressure, and Charles watches his wife retreat from people she had spent years trying to join. Camilla continues every formal duty expected of her, but private invitations become different. Palace staff notice that Charles still accepts family gatherings, while the queen consort begins hesitating whenever Charlotte will be present. These meetings are optional family occasions rather than official engagements, meaning attendance is personal, not required by royal duty. That difference matters because every absence now feels deliberate. Camilla tells herself she is preventing another confrontation, yet the pattern creates exactly what she hoped to avoid: a visible gap inside the family. Catherine sees the danger quickly. Charlotte notices the empty place at tea and asks whether Camilla stayed away because of me. Her mother answers firmly that adults are responsible for their own choices and their own feelings. Charlotte does not have to repair every person around her simply because she spoke honestly. The girl looks relieved, but the relief does not last. She asks whether the queen is angry. Catherine says hurt and anger are not the same thing, and that answer leaves Charlotte quieter than before. Camilla sits alone later and tells Charles she feels reduced to someone who must ask whether his grandchildren are comfortable before entering a room. The king listens, but this time he does not simply defend her pain. He tells his wife that staying away will not make Charlotte trust her. Withdrawal may protect Camilla from another painful moment, but it also places emotional weight back onto the child. For the first time, Charles says the repair must begin without expecting the word grandmother as proof that it worked. William hears that Camilla is considering skipping an upcoming private birthday gathering as well. His concern hardens immediately. If every absence follows Charlotte into another room, then his daughter may begin believing she controls whether adults appear or disappear. That, he says to Catherine, is precisely the burden they wanted to prevent. She agrees, but she also notices something unexpected in Charlotte. The girl is not pleased that Camilla is gone. Camilla returns briefly after the tea has ended and stops beside the untouched place setting prepared for her. She rests one hand on the chair but never sits. The empty seat suddenly feels less like protection and more like surrender. Charlotte had refused a word, not a person. And once William understood that distinction, he encouraged one private conversation that would change the direction of the entire conflict. No king sits between them. No future king speaks for either side. Catherine waits elsewhere. Charles is deliberately absent, and for the first time since the crisis began, Charlotte and Camilla face one another without the machinery of monarchy surrounding the conversation. The young princess has not changed her mind about the word that started everything. Camilla knows that. What changes instead is more difficult. Both finally explain what they believed the other had taken from them. Catherine only helps arrange the meeting after Charlotte says she wants it. William agrees on one condition. Nobody will use the conversation to demand an apology or force a new name. Charles tells Camilla the same thing before she enters. Reconciliation, he says, must begin without conditions. That matters because a royal title is a formal style used in public duty, while a family name carries private emotion. For once, those two worlds are being kept apart. Charlotte brings the same photograph of Diana that had been at the center of the earlier hurt. She places it on the table and tells Camilla she thought the queen wanted her to stop caring about someone important to her father. The words are simple, but they land hard. Camilla does not interrupt. She admits the photograph touched an insecurity she should never have placed on a child. Hearing Diana discussed, she says, can make her feel as if she will always be compared with a memory she can never compete against. Charlotte answers without anger. She says she was never asking Camilla to compete. The sentence disarms her. For years, the queen has carried an adult fear into every mention of Diana, but the young princess had only been asking questions about her own family. Camilla finally sees how much history had been pushed onto a child who never asked to inherit it. Camilla then apologizes directly. She says she was wrong to suggest Charlotte could become too attached to someone she never knew, and wrong again to describe those memories as confusing. She does not ask for the word grandmother. That omission matters. Charlotte accepts the apology, but says she still wants to call her Camilla in private when appropriate and use her proper title at official moments. The queen agrees. Charlotte reaches the door, then stops. She turns back and asks whether Camilla will come to the upcoming family birthday gathering after all. For the first time, the invitation is personal rather than ceremonial. Camilla is caught off guard, but she says yes. They had finally found a private peace, but the public knew nothing about the conversation. And when Charlotte and Camilla appeared together days later, a single gesture became the image everyone wanted to interpret. The public does not hear Charlotte's private conversation with Camilla. It sees something smaller, and in many ways, more powerful. Outside Windsor, cameras capture the young princess stepping from a family gathering, pausing beside the queen and offering her hand rather than the familiar embrace observers expected. Within hours, the image dominates broadcasts and front pages. To outsiders, it looks like rejection. Inside the family, however, the gesture means almost the exact opposite. William knows every movement will be examined before the family even arrives. Catherine knows it too. Rumors have already started circulating around Windsor, and photographers are waiting for a sign that the private tension is real. A royal engagement is a scheduled public appearance carried out on behalf of the monarchy. But this gathering carries a second burden. People are no longer watching only for duty. They are watching Charlotte. Her parents refuse to stage affection. They give her one instruction only: be respectful and be yourself. Camilla feels the pressure pressure the moment the images begin spreading. One front page runs the photograph of Charlotte extending her hand beneath the words "the royal distance." Television panels replay the exchange again and again, treating the missing embrace as evidence that the family rupture has deepened. Near Windsor Castle, a crowd watches the royal cars depart. Some applaud the young princess for standing her ground. Others argue that no child should become the center of an adult conflict. Within hours, one private boundary has become a national argument. Camilla sees the headline and feels humiliated. Charlotte had been polite. The handshake was not punishment. It was the careful middle ground they had agreed could exist. Yet public interpretation turns that progress into apparent rejection. Charles immediately considers whether the palace should clarify what happened. William objects. Any statement explaining Charlotte's feelings, he argues, would expose his daughter to even more scrutiny and force her private emotions into public debate. Camilla surprises them both. She agrees with William. The Queen tells Charles that Charlotte should not be used to repair her image, even if silence leaves the newspapers free to misunderstand them. That choice changes something important. For the first time, Camilla protects the boundary instead of fighting it. Charlotte later sees the newspaper beside William and asks whether she embarrassed Camilla again. Her father answers that respectful honesty is not cruelty. Adults, he says, must stop demanding that children perform feelings simply because cameras are watching. The headlines called it rejection. The palace feared division. But the real verdict would come quietly inside the family, when Charlotte and Camilla met again with no cameras waiting outside. In the end, Charlotte never takes back the sentence that shocked Windsor. She does something more meaningful. She proves that refusing a title does not have to mean refusing a relationship. Camilla, after weeks of hurt and defensiveness, accepts something equally difficult. Belonging cannot be created by royal position, and affection becomes weaker when demanded. What began as an apparent insult ultimately forces 3 generations of the monarchy to confront the difference between ceremonial loyalty and genuine family trust. Charlotte arrives at the final family gathering beside William and Catherine with no special instructions waiting for her. Charles enters with Camilla, and this time the Queen does not hesitate at the door or question whether she should stay. No advisors manage the seating. No one prepares a careful reunion. When private conversation begins, Charlotte uses Camilla's name naturally. Later, when the occasion becomes formal, she uses the proper royal title, meaning the official form of address required by rank and duty. The difference is small, but it proves something powerful. Respect does not have to pretend to be intimacy. Camilla stops waiting for the word that caused the entire conflict. Instead, she asks Charlotte about something the young princess mentioned during their private conversation, and the question catches her off guard. Charlotte realizes she has been remembered. More importantly, she feels listened to rather than managed. Charles notices the change and finally relaxes, not because his wife has won the title he once hoped she would receive, but because bitterness no longer controls the room. William sees it too. For the first time in weeks, the future king no longer looks prepared to defend his daughter from the next emotional blow. Catherine understands what the adults had missed from the beginning. Charlotte's refusal forced the family to confront Diana's memory without treating it like a threat. The younger generation was never creating the conflict by remembering her. The older generation was carrying fear about what those memories might mean. Camilla finally accepts that she does not have to replace Diana to build something real with Charlotte, while the young princess learns that protecting the grandmother she never knew does not require punishing the woman standing before her. Charlotte pauses beside Camilla as the gathering ends and asks whether she will come to another family occasion the following week. There is no forced embrace, no demanded title, and no grand declaration. The Queen simply says she would like that very much, and that became the lasting meaning of Charlotte's refusal. She never called Camilla her grandmother, yet by the end, she no longer needed rejection to defend the people she loved. The family stopped fighting over a word and finally began building a relationship that could survive without it. What unfolded at Windsor was never only about one child's refusal. It was the latest chapter in a longer story of memory, comparison, and the quiet cost of living inside an institution that demands public unity while private wounds remain unhealed. Diana's presence still moves through the rooms of the monarchy, not as a ghost to be banished, but as a figure whose absence continues to shape the living. For Camilla, the years of scrutiny had taught her to measure every gesture against an impossible standard. For William, the responsibility of fatherhood required him to decide where the line between duty and protection must be drawn. For Charles, the crown offered authority over ceremony and title, yet left him powerless over the affections of a child who had already already formed her own quiet judgments. Charlotte, still young, carried none of the political weight the adults assigned to her words. She simply refused to perform an emotion she did not feel. In doing so, she forced the family to confront a truth they had long avoided. Affection cannot be commanded, belonging cannot be legislated, and the past does not disappear simply because the present finds it inconvenient. In the months that followed, the public continued to speculate. Commentators dissected every photograph. Headlines rose and fell. Yet, inside the private rooms of Windsor and beyond, a different understanding settled. Charlotte continued to speak of Diana with the same quiet curiosity. Camilla no longer treated those conversations as a threat. William and Catherine held firm to the boundary they had set. Charles watched, sometimes with regret, sometimes with reluctant respect. The word grandmother remained unspoken between them. It did not need to be spoken. What remained was something more durable, a relationship built without pretense, sustained without force, and allowed to grow at its own pace. In a family where almost everything is measured by protocol and appearance, that quiet agreement carried its own form of dignity. Charlotte never called Camilla grandmother. She never needed to. The family learned at last that some things cannot be claimed by title. They can only be offered and accepted in time.